Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Tom. What's going on?
Do you remember the 80s?
Of course I remember the 80s. I was born. It was a wonderful time.
Do you remember a little movie starring Matthew Broderick, Alan Ruck, and other people? There's like too many to name. There was so many people in this movie.
Oh, you mean the cult classic, Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
That is it, and that's what we're going to talk about today on Can We Talk About?
What is so dangerous about a character like Ferris Bueller is he gives good kids bad ideas.
Uh-huh.
Last thing I need at this point in my career is 1,500 Ferris Bueller disciples running around these halls. He jeopardizes my ability to effectively govern this student body.
Well, makes you look like an ass is what he does, Ed.
Thank you, Grace. I think you're wrong.
Oh, well, he's very popular, Ed. The sportos, motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
Can we talk about Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
We can talk about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That was one of my favorite movies as a kid. Still as an adult, too.
I was going to say, as an adult, too. But there are two very different movies in that the movie I watched as a kid and the movie as an adult.
Ooh, okay.
I view them so differently. Because as a kid...
Yeah.
I wanted to be Ferris. I was like, this is what I need. This is what I need in life. I need freedom. I need to get his joie de vivre. I need to skip school, which I never did, by the way.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, you're like, was Cameron's dad really an asshole, or was just Cameron like a seriously emo kid who was depressed all the time? And, there's two very different views on it.
It's interesting you say that too. I mean, the Cameron storyline hit me harder watching it as an adult, or like it was more apparent as an adult than as a kid. I was like, this is just getting in the way of him having fun cutting school and running around the city and doing funny things. But as an adult, I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize how messed up Cameron was as a kid, or like what he was feeling.
Seriously depressed. Yeah, like clinically depressed, like entering dissociative states. My favorite scene in the whole movie, and I'm sure we can get more into this as we go, but my favorite scene in the whole movie is the museum scene.
Oh yeah.
And I always loved it because I was an art nerd and I just loved everything about it. And I loved, I looked into it right the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, that's the Chicago Art Institute. I need to go. I have to go there. And then now I watch it as an adult. I'm like, that poor boy is staring into that George Seurat painting of a mother and a child holding hands. And the closer it gets, the more he feels he's having like an existential crisis.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting zoomed in closer to the face. And finally, the child has no face.
Yeah.
And he's just like terrified. And as an adult, I'm like, oh my God, I used to love this scene. Yeah. This is so sad.
It's weird to me that John Hughes somehow injected, like, there's this fun movie about a kid who is like skipping school and just out for fun and somehow injects this super deep, just psychological story about this kid who's dealing with like an existential crisis. And more importantly too, the thing that struck me, because this was like, I was like, I got so deep into the Cameron storyline as an adult, like focusing on it and understanding it a little bit better, that as I'm watching it too, I'm like, wait a second, like as he's staring at that painting, like it's the mother holding the child's hand, and I'm like, he doesn't like he briefly mentions his mother. He has a real odd and like just destructive relationship with his father that he talks about all the time. That's very at the surface, but you don't really hear a lot mention his mother. I think he mentioned his mother once. Like his father kind of like yelling at his mother or something, like, so there's like an emotional abuse over there too or something, but he doesn't seem to have a relationship with his mother either, which is actually kind of the odd part, right?
It is. And I read I think it was a Vice article about this whole scene and saying how it's almost like he's looking at the mother and the child, and it's like, why doesn't she protect me?
Yeah.
Why doesn't she stop him? Like, why? And like, really, it's so deep and so gut wrenching and heartbreaking. And the scene where he like freaks out and they finally go back to the pool and they're in the hot tub, and then all of a sudden he just dives into the pool and you think he's trying to kill himself. And it's like, in that moment, it's like, maybe he is, but also maybe he just wants to see if anyone will save him.
Yeah.
And then he just like manically laughs when Ferris pulls him out of the water. Yeah. And Ferris is so mad. And it's just, I feel like that's where he truly breaks, like that moment where he comes out of the water.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny too. Like we're just a couple minutes into talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and we're talking about the deep
You talked about the funny stuff.
Yeah. It's all about that movie is all about the deep psychological torture of a teenager in Chicago.
Poor Cameron.
Even in the beginning of the movie, when you meet Cameron, there's that juxtaposition of like cutting from, Ferris's room, which, is decorated.
A teen boy.
Like a teen boy, right? He's got like,
Yeah.
posters and all this stuff. And you cut to his monochromatic modern room that's, just him under the covers and medicine all over the place. It's like strewn about. And he's and on top of that too.
He's in it, man.
Well, that's the thing too, is like, and I never understood this as a kid, but I'm like, well, why is Cameron home already? Like, Ferris is cutting school, but Cameron's already home. And it's because he just doesn't go to school because he's quote unquote in his head sick. He's just suffering from something. And yeah, it's depression. It's like, oh, cool. That's what 80s depression was. It's just, we didn't even call the word depression never comes up.
Yeah, cannot talk about it.
No.
Can't even acknowledge it. Did you know that, fun fact, that John Hughes wrote this movie in 6 days?
Yes. I found that out after.
Blows my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird to me that there are these filmmakers who kind of come up with these. Like, it was the same thing with the way he came about with Home Alone, which just came off of, them doing Uncle Buck and then him having Macaulay Culkin there and the scene where he's like poking through the mailbox slot talking to someone. And he just was like, what if this kid was home alone? Like, just went off on this entire tangent in his head about like expanding the universe of this child home alone, protecting his house and being a kid. And that turns into Home Alone. But John Hughes was a maniac when it came. And the thing was too, I think what's crazy is, and I always find this weird too, because I'm like, even as an adult now, I have to remind myself I'm an adult, but I'm like, I couldn't write a kid's movie today. I couldn't write a movie about teenagers in, this decade at least. And I'm like, this guy was doing it.
But it'd be off. I'd be off.
Right. He's writing about, how many John Hughes movies were there that dealt with like, the teenagers growing up, right? That was his filmography, right? It was.
And he nailed it.
Yeah. 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, Weird Science, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And then he grows up a little bit. And then it goes into Planes, Trains, and Automobile. She's Having a Baby, Uncle Buck. Curly Sue is later. Was that the last movie he directed? I didn't realize. Okay, yeah. So that was the last movie he directed was Curly Sue.
That's a classic.
Yeah. But the thing is, like,
I love that movie.
He's, John Hughes had this weird pulse on kids of that decade. And I'm like, I still don't understand why. At the time, how old was he when he was doing these 80s movies? Let's see. He was born in 50. So he was in his, 30s?
In his 30s. Yeah. And when you watch videos like the behind the scenes of him on set,
yeah,
it is like he looks like a baby. Like, how are you creating these world changing movies? And even now I can watch Pretty in Pink or 16 Candles. And I remember the moment my mom was like, this is the moment where I show you John Hughes movies. This is the moment in your adolescence where these start to make sense to you.
Yeah.
And even though it was, 20 years later, it still was applicable. All those feelings, even watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that, scene where he's talking about, I think it's again when Cameron starts to lose it and he's like, pretty soon we're going to go off to college and we're going to say we're going to stay best friends, but we're going to go to different colleges and we're going to be, we're going to probably never talk to each other again. And I felt that in my bones because that was the fear I had leaving high school. It's like you have those moments that you don't stop and appreciate to say like, wow, this could be it. This could be our last hurrah before we all go off and graduate.
Yeah.
And he captured it perfectly.
It's funny
because 30-year-old man.
You look at Ferris Bueller, and Ferris Bueller, the character he's wise for his years. And to the point, like, he comes out with those, like, he mentions something about, which I'll get to in a little bit about, like, Cameron marrying someone later in life. And right. It is. He's right. And I definitely know people like that.
He's definitely right.
But the thing is, like, you look at the way he commentates on things, the way he views things. It's like, yeah, no, this Ferris Bueller really is. It's that when you're an adult and you're like, oh man, if I knew what I knew now, if I can go back to high school and knew what I knew now, everything would be completely different. Right. That is Ferris Bueller. That is John Hughes's brain going into a teenage character and acting out. Because all the other characters, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, right? They're all kids being kids. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is an adult in a kid's body. He's conning his way through life, but he's doing it in a way where it's like, you know, as a kid, you're like, that's really cool. As an adult, you're just like, yeah, I can see myself doing that. I can see that if I had to deal with that, like, but that's like escapism. That's, you know, but, and then to ground it all is Cameron, which I guess that's a good point is Ferris Bueller's Day Off without Cameron is a very different movie.
It is. And there's, it's almost like, well, that's just Ferris Bueller's life. Like Cameron is almost grounding. And I also feel like there's a fear for Ferris that he knows Cameron's going to go on to do something incredible. Like he's very intelligent. He's probably going to go on to have like an amazing life and an amazing career. And you never know, these movies, when you revisit them, we'll talk about the spinoff that's, you know, later on. But when you revisit them, like I remember watching this movie as an adult the first time, I'm like, oh, Ferris is going into sales. He's going into insurance sales, life insurance sales. That's where he's going to end up. Something very shystery or real estate where he can make a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I think, is it because, I mean, and that's a good look, especially when you look back at high school and the people who kind of thought they had it all figured out versus the people that were figuring it out. The people that thought they all figured it out ended up not knowing shit. And then they grow up and then they're like, yeah, I'm just going to go into sales because, you know, and then the guys like Cameron who were like literally having, you know, crises at 17 grow up and figure out the world and figure out how to make themselves fit in, and they, you know, go on to do great things. I mean, Cameron clearly ended up in LA where he was on that terrorist bust incident, you know, like 10 years later. But yeah. And the thing is, but there's like stuff that comes out throughout the movie and I was thinking about that, right? Like, you know, the angle Ferris comes from is that he's there to break Cameron out of his shell. And as a kid, I was like, I definitely had those, right? I was definitely Cameron in situations and had friends who were a lot more outgoing and broke me out of my
Ferris.
shell. Yeah.
I was 100% the Ferris.
But,
my best friend says that all the time. She didn't speak until we were in like 7th grade.
Yeah.
And she was like, I didn't have to. Amanda did all the speaking for me.
But that's the thing. It's a balance, right? It's not that Cameron needs Ferris. It's that they need each other. And you see that. And there's like a scene early on when, like, you know, when he slaps the phone out of his hand when he's talking to Rooney, which is a whole other thing.
The best.
But yeah, I mean, it's where they're like, you know, they get mad at each other for the first time and like, you know, but there's this bounce and forth of like back and forth of like, oh no, these guys are best friends and they're close, but they need each other. It's not just a one-way street. And it's interesting because that's the thing. You could say what Cameron, you know, how Cameron acts or anything, but like he says it later on in the movie too. Like he lets Ferris pull him into things. He wants to, he's afraid.
Yeah.
But he lets Ferris do it. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a cool movie, and then we're not even scratching the surface on like what the movie is really just trying to tell, like just on the surface as like, or how you view it as a kid, maybe, which is
I mean, I think for me the movie was just like, this is all about freedom and getting that one day to be free and not have to answer to adults, you know, or anyone older than you, and just getting a day where you can just be as free and happy and authentically yourself without judgment of others as you want to be.
Yeah.
And when I watched like a behind the scenes YouTube video of this, John Hughes is talking about how Rooney, they made his desk and his chair really low to the ground so that when the secretary came in, she's like towering over him because he's just the type of man who's like never had power in his entire life. And now that he has an inkling of power, he's going to abuse it to the, 10th degree. And I just thought that was so funny because when you rewatch that scene where, Cameron and Ferris are trying to call Sloan out of school, it is so hilarious. And that whole scene where the secretary and Rooney are like scrambling was completely unscripted.
Really?
And they're like, we just need like massive panic from you for like 2 minutes. And she's like, we just did this thing where if he was in one room, I would be in the other. And we just completely panicked. And when the secretary picks up the phone and pretends to be Rooney, and she's like, blah, 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 just trying to like pretend to be a mumbling male adult.
Yeah.
She said she completely scripted that and is completely unscripted and everybody lost it. Like they could not stop laughing.
Yeah. What's her name
It's
again?
such a good scene.
What's the actress's name? Do you remember?
Oh, no, but I can tell you in a second. Edie McClurg.
She was like a staple of a bunch of like 80s movies and things. And she's
so
great.
funny. She's so funny.
There's also, there's a lot of like random, one thing I didn't know, which was really interesting, is out of Chicago, there's a really famous, literally like the grandfather of improv is Del Close is in the movie too, which I didn't realize. And for those that don't know, he's the man who essentially started like Second City in Chicago, which is like where most of people from SNL came from for like, majority of that history. And he's that teacher who's just like speaking really slowly. I think the class when they come and get Sloane for the nurse. Really? He's in what way? Like that guy is Del Close. He's literally.
That's incredible.
But it's that connection to Chicago that's there. But I was also reading, and speaking of casting, like some of the other people that were supposed to, that were like, first, just to back up a second. And it's really funny. I was watching it with my wife and she said, she was like, who is that guy? Or like, whatever. I was like, that's Matthew Broderick. And she's like, oh, I almost forget. Like, he's so young, but also for years, he didn't seem to age. And there were a handful of actors that obviously like, John Hughes was like working with throughout some of the movies, and a few that were auditioned for the role. And, some of them were like Anthony Michael Hall was considered for the role at some point, John Cusack, Johnny Depp, Tom Cruise, Michael J. Fox. And you think about the year too, like this is 1986, right? So it's 2 years after Back to the Future. So I don't know if I could have seen Michael J. Fox pulling this off after doing, Back to the Future. But I don't know if I could ever saw anyone else in that role. And also I was reading about like Judd Nelson was originally offered the role of, Cameron, and he completely turned it down. Could
you imagine turning down roles like this, then being like, oh.
And wait, I'm sorry, I got that backwards, by the way. Judd Nelson didn't turn it down. Alan Ruck auditioned for the role Judd Nelson was in The Breakfast Club. He was turned down for that, but they came back to him. Emilio Estevez was offered the role of Cameron, which...
Okay.
I don't know if I could have saw that. Like, even if do you think back at like the type of character he is and like, just like that, because what I think sells Cameron, I don't know why we're focusing on Cameron so much, but clearly it makes some kind of connection as an adult. But to me, I was like, Cameron or Alan Ruck's performance is all in his face. It's all in his facial expressions and everything.
Oh, 100%. Deadpan completely. Yes. Yeah.
His face looks depressed. That's not a knock on Alan Ruck, but him staring into the painting and that dead-eyed look, he looks like a 17-year-old dealing with depression. I don't know if Emilio Estevez could have looked like a 17-year-old dealing with depression.
Definitely, but I don't think he could have nailed just acting straight-faced with your eyes. Like Alan Ruck, the way that he acts with his eyes this whole movie is the best.
Yeah. What you mentioned improv, and I can't tell if like some stuff was just cut out or like there's like random cutaway scenes where like Alan Ruck is sitting in the restaurant just like making people around him uncomfortable, like sneezing and like coughing really loudly and looking at like the and I think that's the other thing too. It kind of winks. It kind of shows you like, yeah, no, he's always nervous, but he kind of likes pushing the boundaries a little bit. Like that's who this kid is. But how, do you know of anything else that was improvised in the movie, or was that?
So the behind the scenes little clip I watched, it said how like John Hughes would have them act what was on paper.
Yeah.
And then would say, oh, all right, what would you guys kind of do what you want with the next take.
Yeah.
And then what they would do is he didn't know what he was going to use until it hit editing.
Right.
Like a lot of they didn't even know, the Matthew Broderick talks about how there was different versions of the movie in his head about how it was going to go because of the way that they acted certain scenes. And he said so much happened on the editing room floor. Like the scene where he's pretending to be Sloane's dad.
Yeah.
And Rooney is on the steps and she like walks down. She's like, oh, I got to go to my dad.
Yeah.
And she walks down and he just like full on makes out with her.
Yeah.
And Rooney just watches and he's like, oh, I guess that's how they do that in their family. Yeah. Like, first of all, such straight 80s creep level beyond belief. But apparently Matthew Broderick says that kiss lasted like a second and they just edited the whole situation to look like it was a long makeout session and that most of the movie was like truly put together in the editing room, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is.
It just goes to show how good John Hughes is at everything that he does.
Yeah. I mean, it's really funny. Like there is his love for Chicago, and you know, his focus on that through like, I think it's funny. The two movies that pop out to me is like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Trains, Planes and Automobiles, which I mean, it kind of ends in Chicago. Right. But like, yeah, like even like the whole parade scene, which is just
parade scene is incredible. A Von Steuben parade on a Friday when kids would be at school. Let's just have the general Von Steuben parade.
Yeah, why not? And then like people like, you know, like dancing in the street and choreographed dancing on the steps and sidewalk.
The first flash mob.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's chaotic in that fun way, but it's funny because it's like a road trip movie, but it's not a road trip. Like it's a road trip into the city. But that whole concept of like into the city, quote unquote, like I grew up in Staten Island, which I'm embarrassed to say half the time. But we would go as a kid. It was the suburbs of New York, and we were technically part of New York City, but that didn't feel like it. But you know, cut school and go into the city, and that's what you did, right? You went into the city for the day. So even
for sure.
Growing up,
I didn't cut school though.
Ever?
But I went into the city. No.
Yeah.
I was such a nerd. Well, I played sports, so you couldn't miss school.
Yeah.
If you missed a day, you couldn't play. So
see, I cut school, but it was never Ferris Bueller level of fun. We were broke and couldn't do anything. We would just go into the city on free public transportation and just wander around the city, and that was it. That was the extent.
Could you imagine letting your child do that now?
No, absolutely not. I mean, yeah, my parents didn't know I was doing that either.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, I think about that stuff. I mean, we had senior skip day, which I asked permission to skip school.
Yeah, you're doing it wrong.
We all let our teachers know, hey, this is senior skip day. And they're like, okay, great. And so they all knew.
Yeah.
But I can't even think about even that day.
Yeah.
I mean, we were reckless.
Yeah.
It was not like I did not party. I just did it on days I didn't have to go to school, but we were out of control.
Yeah.
And I think about that now and I'm like, oh my God, how did no one die? We were drinking beer kegs in fields until, at 1 PM and going cliff jumping hammered. And we're like, yeah, this is the best. And now I look back at it just like this movie and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
We could have died.
I'm going to get dark and I'm going to take a real quick left turn and get really dark on something. Cause I was going over the cast of the movie and trying to figure out like, oh, where, like, cause like his girlfriend in the movie, like didn't really seem to do anything after, right? Sarah
Sloane. Yeah.
Right?
Mia. Yeah.
Sort of fell off. And then the other actress in the movie who we do know of, right, was his sister.
Girl, Jennifer Grey.
Grey. But do you know the story? Do you know what happened to Jennifer Grey? It's
I don't
really
think
dark,
so.
and it's really interesting, and it has a connection to the movie too, which is even funnier. So, Ferris Bueller's Day Out came out in 1986. During the filming, her and Matthew Broderick began dating in secret. No one knew about it. They were secretly dating. 1987, they didn't have TMZ. Well, they were in Ireland, Northern Ireland to be specific. I know you love Ireland, so I got to be specific. It's Northern Ireland.
I love Northern Ireland as well, but I feel like you're about to ruin it for me. So go ahead.
No, it's nothing about Ireland itself.
Okay, good.
Her and Matthew Broderick were driving in a rented car. Matthew Broderick was driving, and then he, because he's American, drove into the wrong lane and collided head on with another car. It was a mother and daughter who were killed in the car.
Oh, this is so dark.
And it is. And Jennifer Grey suffered severe whiplash. Like she was like really injured from the crash. After that, a couple months later, her movie Dirty Dancing comes out, and suddenly she's like, because Ferris Bueller came out before Dirty Dancing. So just Ferris Bueller, the next movie to come out is Dirty Dancing. Dirty Dancing comes out. She's catapulted to fame, but she has no interest in it because she's suffering from not only pain, but survivor's guilt over the crash. And so she completely withdrew from acting after that. And her life
That's
never
so
really.
dark.
Yeah.
That's so dark.
Yeah.
And Matthew Broderick went on to snag Sarah Jessica Parker.
Yes. And he was fined $175 American for careless driving. And he killed a 63 and 28-year-old woman.
That is so
I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing at like the
No.
This is where the chips fell, was that, you know, he like literally killed two people, essentially ruined another actress's career, and then, you know, he went to go star in that, you know, War Games. Now, like War Games was before that, but I'm kidding. But yeah,
he kept going.
He just kept coming. Yeah.
His fame kept going.
Yeah, I mean, he had a bunch of movies after that, right? He had Project X was 87 also, but I will assume that was filmed. Then he did Glory a year later with the Civil War movie. Then The Freshman. He was the voice of Simba in Lion King. Like he just went on, but I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it because he did all that happen. I mean, it's an accident, right? But
yeah, but still, what a dark undertow to the.
Yeah.
I mean, this just goes right back to Ferris Bueller. Seems real happy.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you watch that as a 14-year-old like I did. I'm like, yes, this is everything I aspire to be. And then you watch it again as a 35-year-old. Like, wow, someone hug these poor children. Yeah. But they were also latchkey kids. And that's something else you talk about, like in the 80s and, you know, into the early 90s. Like your parents left you home when you were 6 or 7 years old, and they're like, just lock the door and there's frozen pizza in the fridge. And it's just insane to think about now. They were all latchkey kids. So, you know, doing stuff like this wasn't so far fetched as it is now. Like if this movie came out now, everyone would be like, there's no world where that would happen. People would see them on the street and be like, where are your parents?
Yeah. Well, also, I mean,
it would not happen.
He's homesick, and I think someone sent him a strippergram. Like, is that the insinuation?
Yeah, pretty good. This is pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he shows up standing next to Louis Anderson, or like, you know, the Louis Anderson with a thing of flowers. What I found funnier about that scene too is that Louis Anderson is the flower delivery guy. He delivers flowers on his own, but then comes back with the stripper. Or prostitute, or whatever the hell she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, the other thing I want to going back to Jennifer Grey for a second. What did you think of her character? Because her character has a weird arc.
Because her character is so. I'm the older sister.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I always felt like my sister below me.
Yeah.
She was the one that was always sneaking out. Like that was definitely more of her vibe. So parts of me were like, I get it. Like this kid's always getting you into trouble. I totally get it. But at the same time, she's so hateable.
Yeah.
Like you just really, truly want to punch her in the face.
Yeah.
Like just live a little.
Yeah.
What stick is shoved so far up inside you that you cannot smile?
Well,
and then towards the end of the movie, it's like, again, I watch it now and I'm like, oh my God, this poor girl.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that I didn't understand. So Ferris, she's the older sister, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's how I thought it to be.
No, I agree. She has a car. He has a computer, right? That was the whole insinuation, right? But isn't he also a senior in high school?
So why is she in high school? I know. There's so many things when you rewatch it.
They're not twins. Why is she there?
Is there an answer to this on the interwebs? I need to know.
I don't know. But what's funny to me is like I appreciate the story of Jeannie. I do, right?
Me too.
And I think, but the thing is, like, whereas, like, you know, characters are supposed to grow, right? They're supposed to, you know, be who they are, hit a situation that affects them to change them, and they come out the other side. I don't know what changes Jeannie. Just making out with Charlie Sheen in a police station, like as he's like the old wise one. The old wise drug addict.
That's, you know, and made her the bad girl now. You know, like she was so uptight, and she just like let loose one time to make out with the bad boy in the police station. Again, wild thing to think about a high school child doing.
Right.
Just going to make out with this, you know, dude in a police station.
But here's the thing that doesn't make any sense, right? Okay, so she's all up into like, why does he get to have fun, right? That's like one of the lines she says. Makes out with Charlie Sheen, then suddenly she's all giddy and happy, and then leaves the police station, right? So now she's all like floating on cloud nine. But then she's driving home, and she sees him, and then starts racing home to beat him to the house. But here's what I'm confused by. This is like legitimate confusion, because once she gets home and then she opens the door and she's standing there, then she's on his side. Was she racing home for him? Because it seemed like she was racing home to beat him home, right?
I thought she was racing home to beat him and to like narc on him. Like, I'm going to get there and I'm going to prove that you were home all day.
Right, but she already had the character change a scene before.
So yeah,
at the police station.
I don't know. This is a big hole. This is a hole.
I feel like there's something
John
missing.
Hughes on here.
Like, was it just that she got home to narc on him? Well, because she has there's that facial expression.
I don't know.
When she gets home and then she discovers the teacher's wallet. Is that it? Is like discovering that like the teacher's out to get him, that she's just like, all right, well, screw Mr. Rooney, and now I'll change sides all of a sudden?
Wait. I found the answer.
Okay.
Ferris Bueller is older than her. It says, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Jeannie is determined to spoil her older brother Ferris's plan to feign illness and skip school. John Hughes planned to make her a middle child by introducing two younger siblings. He ultimately decided to cap the number of the Bueller children at 2. Okay. So I misread that. Every 5,000 times. Yeah, I totally, I did not read that situation correctly. I absolutely, maybe that's part of the thing. She's younger and she acts like she's so much older than him. Maybe that's part of the shtick, but I thought for sure she was the older sister.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I feel like the movie needs like a line somewhere to specify, because that's the whole thing, right? Because she got a car and he got a computer. And you would think if he's the older kid and he's like, you know, in high school senior, that he would have been getting a car. Why would his younger sister get? I don't know why I'm focusing on the car. I think the car was the thing that like pushed you into like, oh, okay, so she's the older sister. She's, you know, firstborn. But I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. I always assumed that she was the older sister and then couldn't understand the entire.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay.
My mind is blown now. Okay. Well, that makes more sense, I guess. Another fun fact that I wanted to bring up when we were talking about Cameron is John Hughes based that off of one of his childhood friends.
Really?
Who like always seemed lost all the time and was super neglected by his parents. And when his friend was sick, he would be happy because he was so tired of having to invent fake diseases to get his parents to notice him. So he based Cameron off of this kid that he grew up with. And it was just like, I know this poor Cameron. It just gets worse and worse for this kid.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to talk about the scene where the car goes out the window.
Yeah.
That is like.
Well, all right. Well, we'll talk about the car. What's interesting is, and we had already decided we were going to do an episode on Ferris Bueller's Day Off. After deciding we were going to do an episode on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like someone somewhere heard us. They are now
the universe was listening.
The universe heard. Apparently, they're big listeners of this podcast.
I love it.
They're now producing. Which, by the way, I'm going to preface this by saying, I don't know if any other John Hughes properties have been touched since he passed in this way. Like, they're obviously not doing it. They're not. No one's doing a. I hope not. No one's doing like a 16 Candles reboot or anything like that. Which
they
fingers crossed or whatever. But
they cannot. I
mean, there are some movies where it's just like, leave it alone. Just don't try to redo it. But they'll, Hollywood. But they are doing a spinoff of Ferris Bueller's Day Off based on the two parking garage attendants that take the car for a joyride. And the intent is for the movie, because this is a spin-off movie, the movie will follow them on their adventures with the car. So from when they drop it off and then the movie follows them running around, flying around town, I guess. I'm guessing we're going to get that shot of them flying in the car, like, you know, with the Star Wars theme and everything too. But yeah, so that's in production now, or coming, or has been being produced.
I want to say I'm excited for it, but I'm so jaded when it comes to touching these movies that like I hold near and dear as classics.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's an awesome idea for the movie because they're not really touching the main characters and not touching the main storyline. I like that it's a spin-off and not a prequel or a sequel.
Right.
But what's hilarious about the car is that type of car. It's a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT. Was so expensive for them to even get insurance to have it on the lot.
Yeah.
If it didn't move, if nobody touched it and didn't move, just to have it on the lot, they couldn't afford the insurance. And at the time, the car cost $300,000. They say now it would cost well over $1 million. So what they took old Mustangs as like the body underneath, the frame underneath, and they built like fiberglass kit cars on top to look like the Ferrari. So they had 3 versions of the car. And the scene where the car goes out the window was actually like massive pulley systems. And it was a rope that was attached to pulley systems that was attached to a pickup truck that was 2 blocks away.
Jesus.
Is that not insane? And so when it came time to have it, you know, fly out the window, which is like the most incredible scene.
Yeah. When
it flies out the window and you see Cameron panic, but also there's like such satisfaction for him there that the thing his father loves more than him is dead. It's literally a pickup truck 2 blocks away attached to a pulley system with a rope that just drives forward and pulls the car into the woods.
Jesus. That's hilarious.
That's intense. It says it took them 6 days to shoot just that scene.
I mean, it's worth it. I mean, they sell it.
Totally worth it.
They absolutely sell
totally
it.
Worth it.
It seems like it all happens. Like there's no yeah, it's a great scene. And the thing is, what's funny about that too, right? The whole concept is Ferris is like, oh, we'll just put the car in reverse and it'll ride the, you know, speedometer backwards. And I think what's funny about that too is the fact that, like, you know, Ferris Bueller has all the answers. He's really smart and he's like cunning and, you know, he's like a little bit of a con man. But like, that's not how cars work. And it shows a little bit of like, oh, he didn't know. Like he was like scamming the world and getting away with stuff until here, where it all fell apart a little bit. Because
that's a great point. Yeah.
But it also shows his character a little bit too, where he's just like, well, what do we do now? We go like, all right, well, we'll just crack open the thing and we'll roll it backwards by hand. Like he doesn't give up. That's not his nature. His nature isn't to like, you know, surrender, which he mentioned somewhere else. It's to like, all right, we'll just find another way. We'll just keep going and going and going until we get caught. Like that's how he operates. But
it's so good though. It's such a, I mean, that scene is just so, I can't imagine something like that happening to me. It's like, you know, when you're home and you're messing around with your siblings and your parents aren't home and somebody puts their foot through a wall. Yeah. Or like, you know, like breaks a window and you're in the yard playing baseball or something. And it's just that sheer panic of like, you really think at that moment, I'm going to die. Yeah. Like this is my last day on earth. My parents are going to literally bury me in the ground, which they would never do. Yeah. But that panic and fear is truly like gut debilitating. You cannot move, breathe, or think about anything else. And you just see Cameron's face slowly goes from that, and then you could kind of see him like just inside. You can tell he's so pumped that car is gone, and he doesn't even care if he dies. He's good with it. Well, that was the thing too, because it goes through motions, right? It goes through. He's nervous because it's not rolling back, and then he kind of is like, whatever, no, like I'll deal with it, and then he starts kicking the car. Right? It goes from like he's gonna notice that the speedometer is off. Then it goes into like I'm just gonna start kicking the car, taking his frustrations out. Then he looks at that and it's like, all right, yeah, like he's like growing his like he's growing a little bit every time he gets a little bit further and further until literally he kicks the car out the window and it crashes and blows up. Well, it doesn't blow up, but that's the other thing too. It's a like realistic, like it didn't like explode or anything. It just like it's demolished. It's totaled, but it's, you know, but it's funny, like as his character, like, because every beat he's a little bit more nervous, and then unleashes, and he's like, whatever, I can deal with this. This is the level of
me battling my dad, I can deal with. Like this, the speedometer's, changed. And all of a sudden, nope, now I dented your car. And now I destroyed your car. And that's the ultimate. And then he's like, oh, I'll deal with it. But even Ferris at a point being like, I'll take the heat, that's where it's just like, oh no, like Cameron's got this. And all of a sudden you see Cameron have the same level of confidence that Ferris has the entire movie, where he's just like, no,
yeah, it's the moment it comes together for him. Yeah, I love that. I love that scene so much.
Well, because he stops being afraid. He stops being afraid of his dad. That's what it is. His dad's not even around, but just the fear of unknown, fear of having to deal with this. He's played it over so much in his head that he's just like, nah, I got this. Like, I'm going to deal with it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, we're just going to have to deal with it.
And he does. I mean, like, that to me is the beauty of John Hughes movies, though, because this is supposed to be a hilarious, funny. Yeah. I mean, just the character of Ed Rooney is incredible. He's just such a wild, I'm sure in the 80s there were plenty of principles like that. I mean, John Hughes kind of carries that type of principle through to the other movies too. Like it's the same in The Breakfast Club. It's the same type of guy. Yeah. But there are so many layers to this movie. And again, I feel like I see something or appreciate something different every single time I watch it. Well,
that's the thing too. You compare it to the Dean from the Breakfast Club, right? Where he's just walking around with like authority, right? He is the authority. Edward Rooney, what I love about it is that he doesn't have the confidence of being an authority, right? Like he wants to, and he has a little bit, but it's to your point, right? Like the stuff like where his secretary is like towering over him, right? Like all that. And then you get to the point where she's like, oh, Ed, you sounded like Dirty Harry right there. And you can kind of like, he makes little facial expressions like, yeah, I can. All right, I can be Dirty Harry.
Right. Yeah.
And then, then it cuts to him deciding to go out and, catch him. And he's walking around like flipping his shades up, right? Goes to, and even like there's one of my favorite lines in the entire movie, and it's so silly, but it just shows like an ineptitude, is when he's at the pizza place and he's talking, he's wiping his, after he thinks he caught Ferris and it was a girl and she blows Coca-Cola on him. He walks over to the counter and the game, like the baseball game is on, and he asked the guy like, what's the score? And he goes, nothing. He goes, well, who's winning? And like, he's not even paying attention. Like that's like the best. Yeah. He's just so like, I'm making conversation. Then the guy just like thinks about it for a second. He goes, the Bears. Like,
it's like the most Chicago line.
Yeah. Ever. The score is 0. Always. Who's winning? The Bears.
It's the Bears.
But like, what's so funny about it too is just like, what's the score is 0-0. Who's winning? Like, just it as he's sitting there patting, he's trying to play it cool. That's what I love about it. Is like he's sitting there, or he's standing there blotting, soda off his tie.
Soda off his tie.
But every moment after that, where he goes to the house, right, everything is, it just gets progressively worse. And it's bumbling idiot stuff, right? It's the stuff that, John Hughes goes on with, like, I mean, that right there is like a smaller version of what he decided to do with, like, Home Alone later on, which he didn't direct, but like, obviously like it's John Hughes movie. But yeah, just the whole Edward Rooney like arc of just this guy, the harder he tries to be cunning and slick and the authority, the worse it becomes. And
the worse it becomes, and the more embarrassed he gets, the more embarrassing he gets.
Yeah. Just him hobbling down the street, chasing his car, after he tries to get in his car with the keys, and then the tow truck gets faster, and then it takes his keys with him with it.
It's such good. It's like really perfect 80s comedy.
Yeah.
It's just so 80s, and he does it so well.
Yeah. And I mean, my favorite, which I gotta imagine is what a lot of people's favorite is the credits scene with the bus. It's like, because the thing is, it's not, they don't have to rush it, right? It's a credit scene, so they can just take their time with it. And the pacing of it is nice and slow and chill, and it just takes forever. And like, even just like the bus driver, like, it's almost so slow. Like, sometimes movies, they pace things so fast where it's like, all right, it wouldn't happen that quickly. This is almost the opposite, where the bus driver opens the door and is like, come on. And then he sits there, and it's like a good 30 seconds before he turns around and decides to get on the bus. and then the walk on the bus where they don't move the bus until he sits down and then has a conversation, oddly enough. But like that entire pacing is super slow, which makes it more awkward because it's all like the facial expressions of all these like 80s kids just, and then, you know,
and then he's in just utter defeat.
Yeah, he's in utter defeat and everyone's looking at him, and it just, I don't know. What's the sign on the scribbled on the bus? Rooney eats it.
Yeah, it's like the most demoralizing scene too. It's like this man thinks he has all this authority, and it's like, no, you're going to sit on a school bus with a bunch of children.
Yeah,
who just shit on you left and right,
just covered in mud and shit, and just beat up, and it's great. I love, and that's the thing too is like, the entire scene. I mean, as a kid too, watching him like try to stand and look in the window, and then his foot falls through the mud and then pulls his foot out and it ate his shoe. And just even as a kid, I'm like, I don't even know how to like, how do you deal with that? Like, it's so beyond recognition of like, here he is in like a nice suit and tie or whatever, and now he's just covered in mud and gook and it utterly destroyed.
He's completely, just defeat beyond defeat. And I think for me, my favorite part is just who he wants to present himself as to the world is just like, this well put together guy. And at the end, it's just like, you're a schlep. Yeah. You're a schlep, dude. Sorry. Like, that's who you are.
Yeah. He's eating warm gummy bears that were in her pocket. They're nice and warm. Yeah. So to wrap it up too, like, so after all these years, 1986, right? It was 86.
I wasn't even born. Were you born?
I was. Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't.
I was 2 years old at that point. But what do you think? Does it hold up?
I mean, listen, for sure, there's going to be things that just even now, like the scene with the sex worker coming to the door and just all that kind of stuff where it's just like, oh gosh, you cringe, you're just like, this. Even Rooney, the way that you can tell he's 100% sexually attracted to Sloane. And like, he makes it known when she's like standing on the steps, she's like, thank you so much for your kindness. And he's just like, oh, you're welcome. Like, you can just tell he's just loving it. He's lapping it up. To me, it's just like inside, I'm like, oh gosh, I forget that this was okay. Yeah. We could do this then. But the storyline holds up. And I think now more than ever, especially with the mental health stuff with Cameron, I feel like Gen Z is going to watch that and be like, someone just get this kid some therapy. Yeah. Like, why isn't Cameron seeing a therapist? And it's just such a different world, but all the storyline holds up. I felt that way when I graduated high school, like my whole world was about to change. And I'm sure I had plenty of Cameron moments where I felt misunderstood and all alone. And even just you take out all that seriousness, the laughs are still there. Yeah. I still watch that parade scene where he is just doing that choreography and singing his heart out. And I'm like, this is just pure good fun. Yeah. Yeah. There's a line that still holds up. There's a line during that scene too that you can never understand it because the audio mix is terrible in that just one moment. But I think his girlfriend asks Cameron, like, what do you think he's going to do? Like, what do you think Cameron's going to do after Ferris is going to do after college? And Cameron takes a beat and he's like, he's going to be a fry cook on Venus. And you don't really hear that line because it's so weirdly good. Buried. I've never heard of it. Yeah. Yeah. And then that's when they smile at each other. Like, he's on another planet. Like the way he thinks is so far beyond. And that was the thing too. There's not a lot of scenes between, Sloane and Cameron, but like in that scene right there too, it's like, they're just two normal people, right? What makes them, what elevates even them, right? Because you don't give Sloane enough credit either the entire movie too. Like she goes along, like obviously it's his girlfriend, but like she's running along with his antics and she goes right along with it.
But not sooner than Cameron does. You know what I mean? Like she is right with Cameron as far as like oh my God, we're gonna get caught. Okay, whatever. We'll follow Ferris, but yeah, he's the kid that as a kid you're like, I want to be him. And then as an adult, you're just like, I understand.
I hope my child is never friends with a kid like him.
Yeah. But also I think the world around him, like it wasn't elevated to us. Like, like there's the scenes and the stuff that they go through, but nothing, which I'll give credit to where credit's due. Like nothing is elevated to a point where it's like, oh, that's just completely impossible, right? Like there's like, you have to suspend belief here and there, but like they're not hopping on spaceships, you know, like it's believable. And like even the world around them of like inept, not even inept, right? It's just parents caught up in their own, like they have stuff to do, right? His mom is a real estate agent. She's got to close deals. Father's a ad executive in the city. Like they're just on their own stuff, and their kid is like, yeah, he's, you know, homesick today. Like that's it. Like, you know, like, and just that level of like being a kid or being a teenager and just like, just before you're an adult, but still, you know, juggling being a kid in like an adult-ish body and wanting to have fun, but also, you know, battling like I'm going to have responsibilities. Like, yeah, it's all of that. I think it resonates any age you're at because I
agree.
And the movie, like I watched it with my kid and he had never seen it before. And it was the first time I had seen it in a while and he loved it. The literally laugh out loud. I was laugh out loud crying all these years later at the credits scene.
It's so good.
It is.
It's just so good.
And I was just like, the fact that I know this scene, I've seen it a million times. I watched this movie over and over as a kid, but I can still watch this scene and like literally be belly laughing like that. You know, I mean, you have to,
that holds up. Yeah.
Yeah. It holds up after all these years, but, I gotta find more of those movies. Cause I think the other 80s movies that stand out, it's like, I've seen those a million times. I've seen Back to the Future, you know, more times than I can count. But Ferris Bueller is one where it's like, you know, I've seen it here and there. I've seen it once in a while. When I was a kid, I used to watch it a lot more, but as an adult, I'm like, yeah, no, like until I have to like show it to someone else. I don't know when the next time I'll get to see it, I guess clearly. And I can almost see how they'll connect this spinoff to it. I can almost see them like showing that scene and then showing them drive off. And then just like, that's the start of the movie. It's just, you know, as soon as they leave the garage.
We're going to have to see how this goes. We'll come back with a full review once this is once this is done.
Well, John Hughes isn't around to see it through, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, John Hughes used to trust Chris Columbus to do everything that he couldn't do. So is that what he's going to end up doing?
I don't know. I've got special love for Chris Columbus via the Harry Potter world.
Yeah, that's true.
He did the first Harry Potter. He created the world.
Yeah. Do you think he'll what is he working on now?
I don't know. You know, I mean, do we know exactly who's going to be directing it? Did they say?
No, I mean, it's in early development. So it's just that that's all that was announced.
I guess I'll hold off judgment until I see.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do another episode too on another movie that is like sort of getting re-energized after years, which is...
I know that one makes me really nervous. You know that. I've already told you. I'm really nervous.
We'll have an episode on
I hold it so near and dear.
Yeah. Are you nervous that they're not going to treat it well? Is that it? Are you nervous that they're just going to like...
I don't know, because I mean, they're bringing all the Sanderson sisters back. So you couldn't do it without having them all there. Yeah. So I'm very excited for that. You know, but there are things that that are so 90s and wholesome that I love about the first Hocus Pocus, the way that they're out all night while their parents are getting hammered at a Halloween party and everyone's cool with it. It's just, we'll see. I mean, I'm very excited for it, but holding, you know.
Yeah, fair enough.
We'll see.
I have a lot to talk about for that movie too. So we'll get that. But by the way, one last like fun fact that I just found out too, in just like reading the last of my notes. Jennifer Grey, do you know who she was married to? Up until just recently, actually. Do you know who she was married to?
I do not.
You're not allowed to check your notes. I see you trying to check your notes. You're not allowed.
I'm not. I have no idea.
Have you watched any like the Marvel movies?
I have. Not as many as Kyle would have liked me to. Yeah. But no.
Agent Phil Coulson was her husband, Clark Gregg.
Up until
they recently divorced about a year ago.
Okay.
So. But Jennifer Grey from Dirty Dancing, and more importantly for this conversation,
I just pulled it up. I had to see.
Yeah. Okay. It's just random because like, you know, like just that connection of like, obviously Clark Gregg's been around for years and years. He's done like a lot of stuff. It was just that he happened to sort of break through with like to the mainstream, if you will, through all like the these movies, the Marvel movies. But yeah, that was they were married from early 2001 to 2021, so 20 years.
20 years. They just called it quits.
Yeah.
Damn, Jennifer.
Probably couldn't take it through.
Damn, girl.
That's the thing. COVID is like the breaker of some marriages that,
I mean, I didn't have like normal COVID stay-at-home life like most people did. I still had to go to work. So I feel like there was probably great for Henry and I. That's probably why we got engaged that year.
You guys did the opposite. Most people were calling it off.
Yeah, we did the opposite.
Yeah.
We did the opposite.
But anyway, this is good. I had fun.
This was awesome. I had a great time.
Yay. Cool. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.